Hey, how are you? You came back for some more. Yeah, Magic Bites by Ilona Andrews is pretty addicting, huh? We're almost to the halfway point. Almost. Shall we get started then? If you say so. Let's see. Wiggles hissed as I crossed the floor toward the throne. She fixed me with her empty, hateful eyes and smelled the air, her long tongue shivering through the slit of the lipless mouth. Nice to see you too, sweetheart. Remember my cattle prod? Rowena strode to the snake, her hands settling on the huge triangular head. Weighing nearly 200 pounds, Wiggle could not be picked up and carried away, and snakes cannot be trained. Since most of the time they assume that humans are warm walking trees, Wiggles, however, was a freak born of magic and genetic manipulation. She was still dumb by mammalian standards, but she knew that a hand on her head meant pain if she moved. So she settled into long, languid coils at Rowena's feet. Natara's voice came like a whisper of scales on rough stone. Kate. Nate. He grimaced. I'm not in the mood to be disrespected. No wonder. It's quite late for a man of your age. Ever thought about retirement? You know you will do it, and I know you will do it. Let's get it over with. Test me, you son of a bitch, so I can fight you off once again, and then we'll talk. His power slammed into me, pushing me to the floor. His eyes grew into bottomless pits, commanding all-powerful, sucking me into their awful depths, promising slavery and pain. I clenched my teeth and held him, trying to shield Derek. Natara pushed harder, his power welling like an avalanche, distorting the world, overwhelming it until nothing was left but his will and mine. Locked against each other, a painful shudder pulsed through me. His face twisted, and he bit his lip. Temper, I said through my teeth. Aren't mood swings a sign of early senility? Derek's strained voice said from beyond. The awesome pressure ebbed for an instant, and I gathered my magic, summoning every reserve I had. Strike against the kid, Nate. Strike so I can kill you. The pressure fell abruptly, and I was hurled back from the long black tunnel into the real world. Natara backed off, sensing the danger. Damn it. I glanced at Derek. His face looked bloodless, his hands clenched into fists. Natara was once again playing an amused host. I see you brought a pet, he said. He talks like you. One day, his face promised, one day we'll settle this. My bad habit's running off. Anytime. A whisper announced a new arrival. Gastic came through the arched doors, carrying a briefcase and wearing khaki pants and a black t-neck sweater. He looked so absurd against the backdrop of Natara's vulgar throne room that I almost laughed. Gastic nodded to me and came to stand by my master's throne. Both men were of slight build, but where Nate was slender, Gastic was thin. A diet of steaks and lots of hours in the weight room could make him lean and stony, but I doubted he ever looked at a dumbbell, let alone handled one. He was beginning to bald, and the receding hairline added height to the forehead. His face was plain, save from unremarkable only by the dark eyes betraying his intellect, and that slight touch of distance particular to people who spend their time immersed in thought. Ah, Gastic, Natara said, as if greeting a favorite pet. I was just pondering Kate's new amusement. He would be her. I indulged him. Apprentice. Apprentice, Natara rolled the word in his mouth, tasting it. How modest. Considering his age, it's actually appropriate, although out of character. I hate to disappoint you, but our relationship is strictly professional. Natara's laugh polluted the air. Of course, he said, humoring a small child. How insensitive of me. I smiled at him. Indeed, now that we've established that you have appalling poor taste, would you like a chance to chat with me as a representative of the Order, or shall I make my exit? Suddenly you're all business? Very well. Natara leaned back. I am dissatisfied with the direction your investigation has taken you. I bared my teeth at him. I find that amusing. I don't answer to you. He didn't say anything, so I elaborated. I work for the Order, and the last time I checked, the Order didn't report to Roland. It was amusing to see the effect of the name. Both men jerked as if shocked with the live wire. As you can see, gentlemen, I have access to the Order's database, which was a blatant lie, but they had no way of knowing it. Roland's name short-circuited their logic. If they realized how I knew the name of their leader, they both would suffer an instant apoplexy. Here's what I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Gastic's shadow vampire was tailing Greg Feldman. It was killed suddenly, and you haven't been able to extract an image of the killer from the mind of the journeymen who have been piloting it. You've made no effort to disclose this information to the Order, which is understandable, since you've had to explain why your vampire was following the Night Diviner. What I don't understand is why you haven't been making so much noise over a single vamp. A long pause stretched, and then Natara jerked his wrist in a kind of teller gesture, and looked aside, seemingly losing all interest in our conversation. Rowena remained tranquil, her hand on the snake's head. I wonder what went through her mind. We've lost more than one vampire, Gastic said. You have proof? Gastic opened the briefcase and extracted a stack of photographs. Deja vu. He walked forward to give the stack to me. Derek stepped between us wordlessly, took the pictures from his hand, and delivered them to mine. I looked at a black and white image of a deceased vampire. A bloodsucker laid in a crumpled heap, its wiry body pitifully broken. Thick, dark blood stained its pallid hide. The vamp was coated in it, as if someone had dipped his hand into the blood and smeared it all over its taut skin, the way one would rub oil over the skin of a chicken to prepare it for roasting. The bloodsucker's bald cranium had been neatly cracked, and wet emptiness glared at me where the brain had been. The second photograph, the same vampire this time, placed on its back to better display a long gash that split its torso from the genitals to mid-chest. Yellowish ribs protruded from the blackness of bloody tissue. Someone had used a very sharp knife to cleave the cartilage of several ribs on the left side, separating them from the sternum, not sawing but slicing in a single motion with awful force. The vamp must have been turned on its side to allow the stringy clot of its nearly atrophied intestines to fall out. There was no fat attached to the intestines, so the killer didn't have to bother with cutting it. Same with the bladder and colon. Both organs had atrophied within weeks of undeath, so he didn't have to deal with the mess. The diaphragm was neatly slit, both to remove the remaining intestines and to gain access to the esophagus. He must have peeled back the diaphragm and worked his hand up the chest cavity until he could grab the esophagus and cut it. Then he simply had to pull the esophagus out through the hole, and the blood-soaked, useless lungs and bulging heart would come out with it. I've seen this before. That's how you gutted a deer. He took the brain, the heart, the lungs, what was left of the liver and kidneys, but discarded the intestines. I raised an eyebrow since I didn't see the intestines. He murmured, "The next photograph." I looked and saw the ugly, wet clump of innards and a puddle of blood. Unused, they had shrunk until they resembled tough twine. Admirable skill, Gastic said dryly. The cuts were made with almost surgical precision. He has an excellent knowledge of the vampiric physiology. Any chance of it being an inside job? Gastic looked at me as if I had accused him of devouring small children. We are not stupid, he said. I'm not stupid. All of our people with that degree of skill are accounted for. Besides this one and the shadow, how many did you lose? I asked. 4. 4 vampires? Gastic shifted uncomfortably, looking as if he had tasted something slimy and sour. We aren't happy about the situation. Where are the other photos? We have none. The others were taken. We were not able to recover the bodies. What do you mean, taken? Something killed them instantly, severing the link between their minds and the navigators who piloted them. Then their bodies were removed before a field team was able to recover them. He produced a piece of paper covered with neat typescript. Here's the list of locations, dates, and times. Derek took the list from him and gave it to me. I glanced at it and put it in my pocket. 6 vampires and 7 shape-changers. Someone was trying to start a war between the pack and the people, and was doing a damn good job of it. Who would benefit from it? You're out of 6 vampires, and you can account for only 2 of the bodies? Are you positive that the other 4 aren't active? The idea of 4 unpiloted vamps running around the city made me hurt with dread. They're deceased, Kate. Natara snapped out of his reverie. Why don't you ask Curran and his pet Limpago what was done to our property? Limpago was an inaccurate term to use for Corwin, but Nate seemed so happy to have found it that I let him wallow in his own ignorance. I spoke to the pack, I said. I've been able to clear Corwin to my satisfaction. That's not good enough for me, Natara said. It'll have to do. All of this verbal fencing strained my patience. His imp scan didn't match. I saw the imp scan of the crime scene, Gastic said, coming to life like a shark sensing blood in the water. There was no power print except for our vampire and the diviner. Shit. Me and my big mouth. I should carry a banner with a big sign. Confidential information given away, free. At least it would let people know up front who they were dealing with. You must not have been looking at the right M-scan. The one I saw had a very clear power record of a murderer. Could almost feel the formidable brain working behind Gastic's eyes. Would you be willing to provide us with a copy of the other M-scan? Would you be willing to tell me why the hell your shadow vampire was tailing Feldman? Perhaps we merely wanted to keep an eye on the diviner, Natara said. I pretended to consider it. No, I don't buy it. Keeping a vamp in the field is too expensive for casual surveillance. We have nothing further to discuss, Natara said. A pleasure seeing you too, I said. Gastic, escort the order representative out of our territory, Natara grimaced. We wouldn't want anything to happen to her. I simply couldn't bear it. Gastic gave me an odd look and walked out with us, leaving Arena and Natara behind. Soon as we were out of Nate's earshot, I stopped. You don't really have to escort me. But I do. In that case, I have a question. Gastic looked at me. If I were to taint a living animal with necromantic magic, how would I do it? By taint, you mean? There's no way out of this question without giving myself away. I was too stupid for this job. A sufficient amount of necromantic magic to produce a blended power print. What color? I strained to keep from gritting my teeth. Pale orange. Man, we got some sirens up in this place, huh? You thought about it. Well, the most obvious answer would be to feed an animal on necro-infused flesh. If a rat gorged itself on the flesh of a vampire, the necromantic magic would show up in its stomach contents. Some of it would make its way into the bloodstream, but since it's obvious, it's also wrong. I've scanned animals that fed on undead flesh before, and the power print showed a pure necromantic arch. The magic of the undead flesh overwhelmed the magic of the animal? Gastic nodded. Yes. To produce a blended power print, the influence of the necromantic magic would have to be very subtle. In theory, and this is only in theory, it would have to involve reproduction. I don't understand. If you ask me nicely, I might explain. Could you please explain this to me? It's important and I would very much appreciate it. Gastic allowed him to smile. It touched his lips and vanished in a flicker as if it was no more than a muscle twitch. I showed him my teeth. You're much more pleasant when you talk like a human being, Gastic said. My smile failed to disturb him. The bravado is amusing, but it becomes tiresome. I sighed. I'm a merc. I walk like a merc. I talk like a merc. I act like a merc. So you admit to being a walking stereotype. It's safer that way. For a moment, I thought he somehow understood the deeper meaning of my words. Then he said, "We were talking rats?" Yes, and I did ask nicely. In theory, if I take a female rat and feed it undead flesh while allowing her to mate and carry offspring to term, then repeat the process with the offspring, somewhere down the line the descendants of the original rat may display permanent influence of necromantic magic, which will produce a blended power print, something along the light orange on the M skin. Thank you. Thank you, he smiled. The water of Shiva's fountain was refreshing, splashed it on my face, fighting the urge to lay down in the lovely cold concrete Natara's little test had satinite reserves. But I had once again prevented the show of power he was trying to provoke. Sat on the rim of the fountain. I'm tired. I feel soiled, and in need of a shower. How are you? Derek gripped the rim with his hands and dipped his head into the water. He shook, flinging droplets from his wet hair, and washed his nostrils the way shape changers did when they wanted a clear, strong smell from their noses. That place reeks of death, he said. Yeah, you know it's not wise to mouth off to Natara. Look who's talking. He expects me to mouth off. Still, it's pretty funny. What did you think of Rowena? You don't want to know, he said. You're right, I probably don't. She bothers me. Why? Because she's prettier? I winced. Derek never, ever tell a woman that someone is prettier than her. You'll make an enemy for life. You're funnier than she is, and you hit harder. Oh, thank you. Please continue to reinforce the fact that she's more attractive. If you say that I have a better personality, you'll find out how hard I can hit. He grinned. We walked back to our horses. Be careful on the way back, I said. He gave me a puzzled look. I'm the one protecting you. You should be careful. I shook my head. I finally got my knight in shining armor. Too bad he was a teenage wolf. You think the people are going to try something? Not the people. I slowed down. The pack and the people lost roughly equal numbers, and the murders took place right on the border between them. This string of killings feels carefully managed. By Natara? By someone who would benefit from a war between the pack and the people. Like Natara? Would you let go of Natara already? I frowned at him. Nate, above all, is a businessman. Yes, he would like to diminish the pack. In an outright conflict, the people might even win, but it would leave them so weakened a baby Burke would knock them down. The war isn't cost-effective for the people right now. That's why we got invited into the casino. For all of their posturing, the people are worried. Not only are they out 6 vampires, which are expensive to replace, but they also sense a deeper threat. Why do you think Gastic is walking us home? What threat? Derek shrugged. I'd forgotten how good it felt to talk a theory out. Have you ever heard people say, pull to Gilbert? You know, where the saying comes from? No. About 9 years ago, a rogue master of the dead named Gilbert Calliard tried to take over the people by framing Natara in a sex slave ring. Which is richly ironic. I doubt that snake ever had sex, let alone brokered it. Anyhow, Gilbert's reasoning was that if the people were shamed and Natara got arrested, he could waltz in and take over the operation. He had power in abundance and almost pulled it off. You think he's back? No, Gilbert's dead. Natara killed him and had his heart burned. He still carries the ashes in a little satchel on his neck, but this feels very much like a Gilbert. The plan has a certain brilliance to it. Get the pack and people to battle it out, and then come in and wrestle control from Nate's weak and hopefully dying fingers. Dying is good. One, we have the pack people being torn apart by animals with necrotaint, probably fed on undead flesh. 2, we have vampires being taken out by someone with advanced knowledge of vampiric anatomy. And 3, Nate is scared. Look at the battlements. He doubled their patrols. See the people prize power most of all? They don't exactly encourage violent coups like this. But if the victor offers his obedience to Roland and makes the appropriate noises, he'll most likely get away with it. I think we have a rogue master of the dead on our hands. That had to be it. It made perfect sense. Who's Roland? Derek accidentally intruding on my thoughts. Roland? He's a legendary leader of the people. It's rumored that he's been alive since magic last left the world, which was about 4,000 years ago. He's supposed to have incredible power, almost godlike. Some say he's Merlin, some say he's Gilgamesh. He has some sort of agenda and uses the people to achieve it. Although the majority of them have never seen him, there's no proof of his existence, and people like you and I aren't supposed to know about him. Does he exist? Oh yeah, he's real. How do you know about him? It's my job to know. And trust me, boy wonder, I know entirely too much. I know his habits, I know what food he likes to eat, what women he likes to take to his bed, what book he prefers to read. I know everything my father had known about Roland. I even know his real name. The flow of people to the white arch of the gates had ebbed. It was late or early, depending on the way you looked at it. Skeletal claws of fear iced my spine. The small hairs on the back of my neck and arms stood on their ends, a vampire close. Derek's gelding neighed, but Frog remained stoic. I love this horse. I turned slowly and watched the bloodsucker descend down the snow-white wall of Casino. It crawled headfirst like a mutated gecko. Long yellow talons digging into the mortar. The pallid body, taut with dry, stringy muscle, dripped necromagic. The vamp crept down until its head was level with mine and raised its face. Oh, I know. Me too. There used to be a female during life. Undeath had sharpened already delicate features, making it look like a concentration camp victim. The bloodsucker stared at me with haunted eyes. It raised a thin hand, clutching a small object. Slowly it opened its maw. Its face twitched, trying to twist into a different set of features. I believe this is yours, Gastic's voice said from the vamp's throat. The vamp's fingers opened and the object fell. I caught it, my throwing dagger. How considerate. He had even cleaned the blood off of it. Tell me, Kate, Gastic said, why do you paint your daggers black? So they don't shine when I throw them. Obvious come to think of it. The vamp's throat stank of death. Shall we depart? Please. What's our destination? I knew perfectly well where Greg's apartment was. They probably kept the bloody place under surveillance. Just take me to the edge of your territory. Corner of White and Maple will do. Too late, I remembered that Greg had died at that intersection. This isn't necessary, you know? It is. If you died after a visit to the casino, we'd have to answer many unpleasant questions. I crowded Frau's neck and untied the reins and mounted. A horse, Gastic said with disgust. I might have known. You have something against horses? I'm allergic, not that it matters under the circumstances. He stabled the undead, but good old horses made him sneeze. Go on ahead, I said. The vamp took off, running upright in a clumsy, labored manner. Bloodsuckers aren't built for running on the ground. It requires coordination and breathing, and the process no longer came naturally to one who does not have to breathe. I gave Frau's sides a gentle squeeze, and she took off, breaking into an easy trot. Derek on his gelding close behind. I had a feeling that if Bloodsucker got within striking distance, Frau would try to find out if it was good to walk on. Gastic pushed the vamp for about a block and took it to higher ground. It scrambled up the side of the building and leaped across to its neighbor, defying gravity. Its gaunt form sailed along the third row of windows, talons clutching the wall. Long enough to push away, soundless, undetectable, a new horror. We took the back streets, staying away from the main road. A horseman passed us, riding a snow-white gelding, graceful and mean-eyed, a 1 in 100 kind of horse. The rider wore an expensive leather jacket, edged with wolf fur. He gave me and Derek an appraising look and hurried on his way, adjusting the crossbow that rested on his back. I looked after White's retreat backside, searching for a sign that proclaimed I'm wealthy, please rob me. I didn't see one. I guess he figured his horse made enough of a statement. Ahead, several kids crowded around a fire burning bright in a metal drum. The orange flames licked the drum's edges, throwing yellow highlights of their grimy, determined young faces. Scrawny boy in a dirty sweatshirt and with a tangle of feathers in his lanky hair chanted something dramatically and threw what looked like a dead rat into the fire. Everyone was a sorcerer these days. The kids watched me as I passed them, one of them cursed with gusto, trying to get a reaction. I laughed softly and rode on. If we did have a rogue master of the dead on our hands, then I had absolutely no idea how to ferret him out. Maybe if I had a big box leaning on a stake and tied one of Gastic's vampires under it. We arrived at Rufus and turned north, heading toward the white street. It was named for the snowfall of 14 when 3 inches of fine powder covered the street's ugly asphalt. 3 inches of snow was not terribly unusual for Atlanta, except that it had come in May and refused to melt in the following months despite the 100-degree heat. 3.5 years later, it finally gave in and thawed during an Indian summer. I reached the corner and halted. The twisted form of Gastic's vampire perched on top of a lamppost and wound about it like a snake around a tree limb. It looked at me, eyes glowing with dim red, betraying an influx of magic. Gastic was concentrating hard to hold it in place. Problems? I asked softly. Interference. Gastic's voice sounded like it came through clenched teeth. Someone was trying to wrestle away his control over the vamp. I freed Slayer and laid it across Frow's back. The metal smoked. A thin sheen of moisture glistened down its surface. It could be reacting to Gastic's vamp or to something else. Behind me, Derek's gelding neighed gently. Don't get off your horse, I said. As long as Derek stayed in the saddle, he would remember to act human. I dismounted and tied the horse to an iron fence. Gastic's vamp uncoiled from the lamppost and slid soundlessly to the ground. Took a few unsure, staggering steps into the intersection. Gastic, where are you going? A cart, drawn by a couple of horses, thundered down the street at breakneck speed. The horse spied the vamp and shied, jerking the cart to the side but not far enough. The cart's right wheel smashed into the vampire with a loud, meaty thump, flinging it aside. The driver spat a curse and snapped the reins, forcing the horses into a frenzied gallop, rumbling down the street and vanishing in the space of a breath. The vamp lay still in a pitiful, crumpled heap. How convenient. Slayer in hand, I stepped into the street. Gastic? I called softly. I circled it, sword in hand. Ugly grimace froze the vampire's face. Its left foot twitched. Gastic. Faint hiss tugged at my attention. I turned. Nothing. A small drop of liquid luminescence slid off my blade and fell onto the asphalt. A blast of icy terror hit me like a sledgehammer. I whirled, lashing out on instinct, and felt the saber graze flesh as a grotesque shape plummeted at me from above. The creature twisted away from my sword in midair and landed softly to the side. Derek's horse screamed and galloped into the night, carrying him off. I backed away toward Gastic's fallen vamp. The thing followed me on all fours. It was a vampire, but one so ancient that no trace of it, having walked upright, remained. The bones of its spine and hips had permanently shifted to adapt to quadruped locomotion. The creature advanced, lean and wiry like a greyhound. An inch-high bone crest shielded its spine. Formed by outer growth of the vertebrae, through the leather-thick skin, it paused, hugged in the ground for a moment, and rose again, ruby-red eyes fixed on me. Its face no longer bore any resemblance to a human. The skull jutted back in the bony horn-like curve to balance the horribly massive protruding jaws. The creature had no nose, not even a hint of the nose bridge. It opened its mouth, splitting its head in half. Rows of fangs gleamed against the blackness. It wouldn't just puncture and rip, it would shred me. The creature's eyes focused on me. The owlic pupils gleamed with red. It leaped with inhuman speed. I aimed for the throat and missed, my blade sinking to the hilt onto its shoulders. The thing swept me off my feet. I hit the ground hard, my head bounced off the pavement, and the world swam, pressure ground into my chest, forcing the air from my lungs. I strained and set a jolt of my power through the Slayer's blade. The saber's hilt was jerked from my hand, and the pressure vanished. I sucked in a lungful of air and scrambled to my feet. The throwing knife in my hand. The creature shivered a dozen feet away, dazed and uncertain. The thin blade of my saber protruded from its back, 2 inches lower in the left. I would have hit its heart. The shoulder jerked, twisted by a powerful spasm, and Slayer ground deep into the muscle seeking the heart. The flesh around the blade softened like melted wax. The creature's head snapped, and it whipped around to face me. 2 more inches. It would take Slayer at least 3 minutes to burrow that deep into the flesh. I'd have survived for 3 minutes. No problem. I hurled my dagger. The tip of the blade bounced off the bony ridge just above the left orbit. Spectacular. The creature leaped, sailing easily across the 12 feet separating us, and a fury shape smashed into it mid-flight. They rolled, the vampire and the werewolf, one snarling, the other hissing. I chased them. For a moment, Derek pinned the bloodsucker, his claws fastened into the vampire's gut, and the vampire raked at the werewolf and shrugged him off. I lunged. It didn't expect me to attack, and I delivered a clean kick to its shoulder. It's like kicking a marble column. I heard the bone crunch and hammered 2 quick thrusts to its neck. The creature swept at me, tearing at my clothes. In a whirlwind of teeth and claws, I parried the best I could. No sound issued from the monster's mouth. A claw raked at me. A hot whip of pain stung my ribs and my stomach. The thing snapped an inch from my face. I jerked back, expecting the horrid maw to engulf me. But the vamp let go and took a step backward. A set of new vampire arms was growing from its back. It spun, flailing, and I saw Gastic's vampire clinging to its neck. The bloodsucker rode the monster's back, clawing at the massive neck. The creature tore at its arms and reared. Derek clutched its hind legs. The vamp kicked, but Derek clung to him. I took a running start and hammered a kick into the vampire's ruined chest. Bone crunched. The vampire's flesh tore like an overfilled water sack, releasing a torrent of foul-smelling liquid. The creature shrieked for the first time, an enraged, grating sound. The veins under its pallid hide bulged, and its eyes smoldered deep blood red, illuminating of its face. It had sustained too much damage and was about to succumb to bloodlust breaking from its master's control. It flung Gastic's vampire away like a terrier flings a rat. Derek kept clawing at it, oblivious. "Get away from it!" I kicked the werewolf. He snarled, furious, and I kicked him again. He let go and came at me, growling. I shoved him aside. The creature screamed again and again, its body twisting, warping as muscles knotted and snapped. Bony spikes pierced its shoulders, curving from its frame like horns. It reared and pawed at the ground, leaving cuts in the asphalt. I could see Slayer's blade through the hole in its chest. Vampire charged me. It came with astonishing speed, impossible to stop. It smashed into me, and I grabbed Slayer's hilt and thrust with everything I had. We hit the asphalt and skidded until we crashed into a wall. Good thing it was in our way. We might have kept going. I lay very still. The creature's blood surged from its ruptured heart, drenching me. Colored circles blocked my view. Gradually, I became aware of 2 eyes glowing gentle yellow above the vampire's shoulder. I blinked, bringing the furry nightmare of a face into focus. "You okay?" "No. You okay?" My voice sounded hoarse. With the short growling noise, Derek swiped the corpse off me and pulled me to my feet. "Thank you," I said. Derek was bleeding. A long gash marred his right leg, and jagged claw marks seared his shoulder. He saw me looking and snarled, swinging away so I couldn't see his hip. I was bleeding too. Fire bathed my waist, and it hurt to bend forward. I put my foot onto the vamp and pulled out Slayer. It came away easily, the flesh enclosing the blade liquefied by its magic. Positioning myself, I swung the saber and sliced through the creature's neck. The deformed head rolled. I picked it up. The fire had gone out of its eyes. They looked empty, dead. Drenched in foul-smelling blood and hurting, I looked for Frau. Through all that, the mare stayed put. I couldn't believe it. I started toward her, stumbling a little, walking for some odd reason. Proved to be troublesome. Halfway to Frau, I changed my course and aimed for Gastic's vamp instead. The vamp lay on its stomach, its face toward me. I put the head down in front of it and tapped it with my finger. "I guess that settles it. How old is Gastic? 300 years more?" The vamp struggled to say something. I shook my head. "Don't bother." I'll find out. Thanks for your help. You can tell Natara he can take his security and shove it. Mint whipped its hand, clamping onto my foot. Gently I took the hand off my bloodstained shoe, stepped over it, and headed to the horse. Derek stared at the bloodsucker with malice. Let him be. We need to get out before the people's cleanup crew gets here. Patted Frau and jammed the head into the saddlebag. The mare snorted, offended by the awful smell. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I took down the large army-issue waterproof bag. Gasoline, I told Derek as if he couldn't smell it. I splashed it over the spill, threw the bag aside, and reached for my matches. My fingers shook. I struck one match, another. On the fourth, the gasoline flared. Gastic's vamp screeched as his evidence in my blood went up in smoke. I walked Frau into the night, and my loyal wolf followed me, limping. I think that's a great place to stop, don't you? I think so. So what'd you think? Did you enjoy the book so far? Good. Now, run along. I'll see you next time, okay? You take care of yourself. Bye.